Vanity. There are many types of those. And it is as consuming as the strongest addictions known to mankind. Some people can forget about everything just to fulfill their thirst of being the center of attention, being the star, being the subject of all conversations. It doesn't matter what it is. Some people refer to it as self-esteem because they like themselves. Is that true? Is that such an honest feeling or knowledge of self-worth? Or is it just a need to fill up a void there is in one's self? A need so strong that people can leave everything behind: respect, ethics, family, love, money, only for the sake of having everyone's eyes turned to them. How far can a person go for vanity? How much would a person do for a selfish feeling of a lonely satisfaction? Would destruction be an option? Yours or others? Sit down, and let me tell you a story where vanity took its toll on a talented, elegant Japanese model and drove her in a path of no return towards darkness. This is the story of Kuchisake Onna. The world of glamour, lights, celebrities, money, power, and beautiful people. Fashion plays a major role in society's behavior. It's not a mere form of getting dressed, but to make you feel as part of the society by the looks that sometimes is not yours, but still, you follow. And you will follow the living guidelines of how a person should look like, dress like, be like. Models. They are everywhere, on billboards, televisions, magazines, even in the box cover of your favorite yogurt. The whole beauty industry is here to sell us only one thing: illusion. What is more prone to sell this kind of product, or any product for that matter? Beautiful people, especially women. They carry the image of how a fantasy princess should be like, or even more than that. Sometimes they are portrayed as goddesses, the meaning of everything holy and divine. And as every product of one's imagination, they are as tangible as such. As every product, they have a lifespan, and just like any kitchen appliance, when they are not useful anymore, they are either forgotten or tossed away, for their durability is delicate, and most of the times, hollowed in their thin shells wearing makeup. Most of them are treated as living walking hangers for some degenerate stylist, to show their most extravagant and expensive clothes to people that don't care even in the slightest about what has a life and breathes walking inside the fabric. But why? Why would someone be subjected to sometimes survive in sometimes horrible conditions, abusive schedules, physical and mental disrespect? Is it worth it? Once a model giving interview said when she was asked the following question: "Does being beautiful gives you anything?" And without hesitating she answered, "Being beautiful gives me everything, open all the doors. Everything is easier because we are beautiful." And those were the exact thoughts of Aya Matsubara. She was not just any model, she was an international supermodel from Yokohama in Kanagawa Prefecture. Her success was topic of conversation all over the agencies. She was tall, elegant, had a slender and a magical body only that seemed was made by the hands of the gods themselves. She had mysterious eyes that could bend all men to her will and a smile that made even the coldest of people feel touched. All the young girls wanted to look like her. She had a very busy life, always flying from Japan to France, then to Rome and Greece. This was the life she wanted. She dreamed as a little girl of being a model walking on the runways of the Rakuten Fashion Week in Tokyo, and when she actually did, it was a very emotional time for her. And then, the world took notice of her. They loved Aya, her posture, her face. All the other girls that worked alongside her also liked and admired her as a professional. They knew, even though they were all beautiful, they couldn't come even near in competition with Aya, and in such a hostile world, as unnatural as it was, there was no competition. Aya was the kind of woman that would help and talk to everybody. That is how her parents raised her. But of course, she was not perfect. She had a good heart indeed, but still, she enjoyed all the dark side of that life: parties, drugs, alcohol, and going to bed with powerful men only for her advantage. She was introduced to this dark side early in her career. At first, she was scared. She heard stories of other models getting lost in this life, losing everything because of addictions. There was also the fact that also a big number of them quit and moved on with a simpler but more meaningful lives in their opinion. Not forgetting to mention that others decided not to keep holding to their lives because of the dark side out of the spotlight. Aya was in control. She had such control of her career that she got to a point that she decided when and where, and with whom she wanted to work with. Always when she had time, she would stop by Yokohama to visit her parents that always had a warm welcome and open arms. Her bedroom that she grew up in was always there for her if she decided to come back home, her mother used to tell her. That always gave her a sense of comfort and home. But still, being the center of the world's attention also felt like home. She had her own place in Tokyo, and as she lived alone, she could do what she pleased. Sometimes on her days off a cold breeze would surround her, but those were for brief moments. What would constantly happen is the sense of being watched. One night as she fell asleep on her couch, she woke startled. She could have sworn she heard someone's voice whispering to her ear. Aya had trouble sleeping, so she was always taking pills when she went to bed. Maybe it was the effect of the medication or even the stressful life she had, but one night as her eyes were giving up staying open and Aya being awake, in the dark corner of her bedroom she saw for a brief moment a tall woman. She was wearing something red. She couldn't make what it was, but it looked like a trench coat with some black flowers drawn on it. What was evident and scary as this image got imprinted on her memory was the pair of white glowing eyes. She didn't see the woman's face. She tried, but it was shrouded by shadows. Was she wearing a black face mask? Aya slept. Every morning routine was the same. She would wake up, have breakfast, then take a shower, and then dive into her immense collection of facial creams and other products for skincare. She went to the gym regularly to keep her body fit. Big part of her day was on the phone or laptop checking contracts, sending and receiving emails to and from her manager and agencies. She sometimes would check on the feedback she had on the movie where she played the role of the main character in a horror movie. Just like her idol, Mrs. Nakamayuki had played Sadako in a movie adaptation of a very famous horror novel series. Aya was a farmer girl that had a tragic life and became an Onryo called the Slitmouth Woman. She was the wife of a very jealous samurai. Everybody was leaving comments on her social media saying that she looked amazing in the movie, and some other asked if she would change careers and become an actress instead. It wasn't a bad idea at all, since as the days passed by, she wanted everyone to know her, to see how beautiful she was, and how only the fact that she was born that way could take her far. One day she was looking at the mirror and kept wondering if it wasn't time for a plastic surgery. Maybe to lift a little her nose or her cheeks. She looked down. Some silicone maybe? Nah, it was fine. She didn't worry at all. But there was something on her mind that needed changing on her face. She smiled to herself at the mirror, and for a split second she saw something so horrible that made her scream. Her reflection was deformed. The mouth had 2 major cuts that would go from the corner of her lips to her ears. There were some very rough stitches carelessly attached to her skin. It immediately reminded of her movie. It was horrible. She never liked horror movies, was always scared of watching them, but being part of one was a lot of fun. It was good money too. The days went by and her life went on as it was supposed to. Photo shoots for magazine covers, TV commercials for telephone companies, interviews and talk shows. Aya loved every single thing about her life. But one thing kept bothering her, the sensation of not being alone, that there was someone with her. This feeling grew stronger and stronger. One time she was on an airplane flying to Milan. The hair of her neck rose, and she looked back. The seats were empty. She turned her face front again and tried to read a book. She felt something touch her hair. Once again, startled, she looked back. Nothing. Aya stood up to make sure there wasn't a person hiding somewhere. She couldn't find anyone. She sat on her seat again and looked out the small airplane window. It was a very calm flight, but it would take a very long time to arrive at her destination. She fell asleep, not knowing that there was indeed someone behind her, that no one could actually see. One day she got a call from her manager saying that he had the opportunity of her life to be the next Asian actress known worldwide. There was going to be a party with some producers, but one of them was from Hollywood and he was looking for a Japanese woman to play the main character on his movie. She had just arrived home and was tired from the trip she made to Italy. It was a great opportunity indeed, but something told her to stay home. She was tired. All she wanted was to take a long shower and go straight to bed. Her manager insisted, saying that was a chance in a lifetime. Instantly her mind took her to a world where she could see herself being everyone's center of attention, admiring and loving her, on the movie theaters, their TVs at home, even in pirated versions of her movies in a person's computer. It didn't matter. Everybody would say the name Matsubara. And also, being an actress had a life-lasting chance of prestige. She had to think about her future. She said that she would go, but in her time since she's just put her feet home, the manager said that it was okay as long as she appeared at the party. After a long and much-needed shower, Aya stood in front of the mirror and gave a long deep look at her reflection. She analyzed every single detail of her beautiful face. She thought for a second that if she was someone else and met her, she would most certainly fall in love. Every second she stared at herself, she was even more drawn to the reflection. And involuntarily she asked, "Am I beautiful?" Slowly she opened a wide smile, waited a little and then answered, "You are perfect." She turned her back to the mirror and went to the bedroom. The Aya from the mirror followed with her eyes. 1 hour later she was at the party enjoying a glass of champagne and talking to some people. Out of the crowd came her manager, and gently took her by the arm to present her to the Hollywood producer. He introduced them and then left so they could better talk about things and get to know each other. He was a man around his 50s or 60s in a tacky yellow suit. As expected by Aya, he said she was gorgeous, actually the most beautiful woman in the entire place, and all that small talk she always had to fake she was interested. When they started to talk about the movie, it all seemed very interesting. and then he came closer to her and said to her ear that the role was hers, as long as they would have a chance to get to know each other better in a hotel bedroom. He discreetly grabbed her with one hand from behind and squeezed. "I'll even pay you a little extra," he spoke. She gently removed his hands from her and turned to face him. She gave a gentle and sweet smile. She looked right into his eyes. "I'm sorry, Bacon, was it?" Aya asked. "Baker, Jeremy Baker." He smiled. "I see. Well, Bacon suits you more, piggy. Not even all the money in the world would make me want to even imagine how it would be like to see you even without your glasses. You most certainly wouldn't expect to be on top of me now, would you? I mean, look at you. I would die suffocated. How long has it been since you last saw it? How would you expect me to find it under all that pile of falling disgusting fat?" Aya said in a very calm, low and sweet voice. As he would try to answer her completely offended, she interrupted him again. Now, piggy, let's not make ourselves more embarrassed by squealing around, okay?" She laughed. "Oh my God, I can't even imagine how a big pig like you would sound. Tell me, did anyone tell you squealed like a pig when you did it? I bet they did, didn't they?" She turned her back and walked away. As she was leaving the party, her manager asked how it went, and she said that it was not going to happen. She was not interested, and left. She took a cab back home. In the middle of the way, she saw a clothes store, and on display there was this beautiful, long red trench coat with black roses drawn all over it. A strong desire of having it took over her, and since the store was not very far from her house, the very next day she would buy it, and so she did. The next morning, Aya woke up with a very angry manager screaming on the phone, saying that the producer could sue her if he wanted to, and that she had humiliated him, calling him a fat pig. Aya couldn't help but laugh. She said, "Oh, calm down, he won't do anything. He just got offended because I wouldn't go to bed with him. And different from girls that provide this kind of service for food, I go to bed with man, because 1, I can. 2, I want. 3, I choose who. And since my job can provide me with anything I want, thank you, I'll pass." Later, she got out to the store where she saw the red trench coat. She was mesmerized by it. Somehow it looked like she had seen it before somewhere, or on someone. She didn't remember. When she tried it out, she felt different. As she looked herself in the mirror, she couldn't help to feel even more beautiful with it, and the timing was just right. The cold weather was just around the corner. This was perfect. She turned to the saleswoman and asked, "Am I beautiful?" And without thinking, the saleswoman answered, "You look fantastic with it." One happy Aya got to her car and put the bag with her new purchase on the back seat. While driving, she would look to the bag through her rearview mirror from time to time. But one thing intensified more than ever. The sensation she wasn't alone. It was so strong that she felt the urge to ask if there was someone in the car with her, but didn't do so. She was certain if she did, someone would answer. A heavy feeling of dread fell upon Aya. Her heart started to pound inside her chest. There was someone. Someone in the car. Someone in the car with her. Aya knew. Without noticing it, her foot was heavier on the gas pedal. She was going way faster. Her grip got stronger on the steering wheel. Once again, she looked through her rearview mirror to see a tall Japanese woman wearing a red trench coat with black roses drawn on it, the very same Aya had bought. She had white glowing eyes and a black face mask covering her mouth. Aya's eyes grew wide in terror. The woman sitting in the back seat removed her mask to show a horrendous sight. Her deformed mouth, covered in rough stitches attached to her cheeks, and a very big and grotesque cut that would go through the corner of her lips to her ears. With a demonic voice, the woman in the back seat asked, "Am I beautiful?" Aya screamed, and as she looked forward, she saw a vehicle stopped in the red light right in front of her. She stepped on the brakes, but it was too late. Her car hit the other one in a violent crash. In the back seat of the other car were sitting two kids that got killed in the accident. Big shards of the windshield flew everywhere, most of them landing on Aya's face. 2 days later, Aya woke up in a hospital bed. Pain pierced through her entire body. A nurse looked at her and smiled. "Finally, you are awake. How are you feeling?" Aya tried to talk, but an excruciating pain took over her entire face. "Don't try to talk or the stitches will come off." The nurse grabbed a notepad with a pen and handed to Aya. "Here, do you think you can write?" Aya looked puzzled at the nurse and then to the notepad and took it. She wrote, "Where am I?" and showed to the nurse. "Oh, you are at Bokudo Hospital." Aya wrote, "What happened?" The nurse answered, "You were in a car crash. Now, try to rest. I will call the doctor." As the nurse left, Aya stared at the ceiling as flashes of the accident would make her remember of what happened. The red woman, she thought. The red woman was there with me. Aya remembered the woman's disfigured face, and that made her skin crawl. Sometime later, an older man came and looked at her medical chart without an expression on his face. Then he looked at her and finally smiled. "Good to see you are still among us, Mrs. Matsubara. Actually, it was a miracle you even survived the accident. I don't think you will be able to see it now, but outside is filled with reporters at the hospital's doors wanting to know about you. Everyone is talking about you on television." By instinct, Aya tried to talk, but the pain reminded her she couldn't, so she wrote instead. "Not the kind of attention I was willing, at least not this way." The doctor gave her a gentle smile. "Don't worry about that. Now the only thing you have to do is to rest." She tried to touch her face. "No, please, don't do that or it won't heal." His expression saddened. The wounds were very deep. Hearing that terrified Aya to her core. What did he mean by that? What happened to her face? Why couldn't she touch it? Once again, a flash of memory bringing the image of the red woman with the horrendous mouth on the back seat of her car. Later, her manager came to visit her. He had the face of a man that carried all the worries in the world. He asked how she was and she answered that she felt pain all over her body. He didn't smile once. He said he would come back to see her the next day because they needed to talk about more serious matters. Now he would talk to the reporters about her condition. That night, Aya asked to turn the TV on. There was in her room. The first thing she saw was the news with her picture talking about the accident. The reporter was saying that the tragic accident took the lives of 2 children, a 5 and a 3-year-old, and the mother who was driving was in a coma and maybe she wouldn't survive according to the doctors. Aya's heart sank and she started to cry. Did I do that? Did I really destroy those people's lives? Did I kill 2 small children? And the very next thought was of what would be of her career now. Would she still be hired? Was her dream over? And then a worse question. What about my face? Is it ruined? The next day came and it was the last as Aya knew. First thing in the morning she was greeted by a group of doctors. The one that talked to her the day before was there too. The rest of the group was from the plastic and reconstructive surgery department. Everyone was silent. With a nod from one of the doctors, a nurse came to Aya and gently removed her bandages. Most of it was covering her mouth. When it was all removed, Aya noticed the doctor's expressions. Some of them tried not to demonstrate any kind of emotion, but most of them looked at her with utmost interest and curiosity. Aya again tried to speak, but still couldn't. It hurt very much. Those looks didn't make Aya feel any better, actually did the complete opposite. One of the doctors stepped forward and said, "Mrs. Matsubara, my name is Koichiro Endo, head of the Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery Department. Because of the severity of your facial injuries, we are ready to do everything in our power to fix the damage to your face." Then he looked to the nurse and nodded again, and she brought Aya a mirror. Aya grabbed and slowly positioned to her face. Her heart was accelerated, the air didn't enter as easy as before, and what she saw at first didn't seem like her. She took a second to realize that it was. Her beautiful face was full of cuts and bruises, but the gross part was her mouth, stitched in a giant cut almost splitting her face in half, going from the corners of her lips to her ears. Her hands started shaking, an indescribable torrent of horror grew inside her, and it was wild. It was a monster. The feeling of everything was unbearable. Rage, sorrow, fear, everything exploded inside her, expelled in a horrendous and deformed scream. She threw the mirror away, breaking it. She had to get out of there. The nurses and doctors held her in place as she screamed and screamed, not caring one bit about the pain. The stitches on her face were tearing apart as the non-healed skin as well. Blood started to flow from her wound. They managed to put her to sleep with an injection, and she was brought immediately to surgical procedure. A few days passed and Aya stayed at the hospital. She wasn't allowed to look at her face while she was still there. The doctors did what was possible, but something went, in a way not even them could understand. Hours after hours in surgery, Aya was back to her room. She went back at least 5 times back to the plastic surgery room. And each time the doctors looked even more disappointed. One day her manager came to see her and talked to her about the consequences of the accident. The family of the mother and 2 children wanted to go to court. With difficulty she asked, "Can't we just strike a deal? I pay them whatever they want." "What did my lawyers say?" The manager took her hand. "They said that this was the best you could do. Let's not draw any more attention to this, so pay the family what they want and let's get this over with." Aya agreed. The nurse entered. It was time to change Aya's bandages. The manager stepped back and let her do her job. As he looked at Aya's face, he couldn't hide it. He was horrified. She wanted to ask him what happened, but then he just said he had something to do, and trying not to look at her, he left. Finally discharged from the hospital, Aya was getting ready to go home. The nurse helped her. She asked her for a mirror, but the nurse wouldn't give it to her. Aya was helped getting dressed, and somehow a black bag she knew well was brought to her. It was the bag that she had the red trench coat. The weather report said that it would be a very cold day and people should be prepared for winter. Aya asked her manager to bring a cute black suit she had at her house and a long neck black shirt. She thought the combination would look good. Aya had no need for the bandages covering her mouth. She would wear only a face mask to cover it. She started to feel less pain and eat normally, even though hospital food was nothing to be happy about ingesting. After was dressed up, she looked at the nurse and asked if there was any possibility to have a black face mask to go with it all. The nurse smiled and bowed, asking her to wait a little. She came back and handed over to Aya. Then, with the help of the nurse, she applied some makeup on her eyes, since it was the only visible part of her face. There, all done. She turned to both the nurse and the manager, asking, "So, what do you think? Am I beautiful?" They both said yes without a doubt. Her manager even forgot of what he saw a few days ago. Aya was just wonderful. Her mysterious eyes had become two beautiful piercing landmarks of the unknown. One easily could get lost in them. The nurse thought to herself that if the accident didn't happen, she was before the most beautiful woman on the planet. Aya was back home after she was dropped off by her manager. Somehow the place looked different to her. It was the feeling she had the first time she spent the first night in. She knew it was her home, but it didn't feel like it. She hanged her trench coat and slowly walked around the house, looking everywhere as if it was all new to her. She knew it wasn't, but still. Something was off, missing. She sat down on her sofa and stared at the wall for a moment. What now? She asked herself. Silence. Aya took her phone out of her purse to check her social media. As expected, a lot of messages, people wishing she would get well soon, and some very few calling her a child killer. Nothing that would bother her. People on the internet sometimes made themselves without any shame be shown for what they really were, useless and discardable pieces of dead weight on the planet. Everything legally possible about the accident was taken care of. She didn't have to worry about that. But one thing bothered her more than anything, her career. Why didn't they let her see her face? She got up and slowly walked to her bathroom. There it was, her big mirror showing her reflection, a tall, beautiful Japanese woman with long black straight hair, wearing an elegant black suit with a black skirt. Her face was adorned with a black face mask. She kept looking for a while. One of her hands slowly went to her face and took the mask out, revealing two horrendous fresh scars with stitches attached on her face. She couldn't believe it. Her legs wanted to give up, and she gave 2 steps back away from the mirror. It was all over for her, her career, her beauty, her face, it was all ruined. A mix of anger and despair took over her. Aya screamed from the top of her lungs and punched the mirror, shattering it. Blood started running from her hand. She looked down, hiding her face with her hair, and cried. She felt her strength leave her body and let herself fall to the floor, laying with mirror shards all over the place. She cried herself to sleep. The next day, Aya's manager stopped by her house to visit her, bringing a box of hard candy. He knew those were the ones she loved. Aya was still wearing her pajamas. It was the first time he had seen her so casual. She thanked him for the gift and invited him in. He asked her how she was doing, and she remained silent. It was obvious enough that there was no answer needed. He said that there were some TV shows that wanted to interview her, to know about the accident. Aya said she didn't want to talk about it, that they both agreed not to get more attention towards that fact. He asked, "And what do you intend to do, Aya?" She answered promptly, "I'll look for a plastic surgeon to fix this," and then she removed her mask, showing her deformed lower part of the face. The manager tried to keep looking at her, but it was horrendous enough. He turned his face away. Aya couldn't feel more offended and walked towards him and said, "Look at me." He didn't look. "Look at me." And then she grabbed her manager's face and turned towards her, forcing him to look at her, and then she asked, "Am I beautiful?" He started to get scared of her. There was something different about Aya. Her face showed a malevolent intent. Her eyes started to have a dim white glow on them. She yelled, "Answer me. Am I beautiful?" He almost couldn't speak, and in a weak, shaken voice he said, "Yes." "Liar." Aya yelled again, and this time she grabbed him by the neck, lifting him from the ground. She threw him on the floor. He crawled away from her. She kept looking at him. Once again, blood was running from her scars. He couldn't see anything but evil in her. He got up and ran away. That was the before last time Aya ever saw him again. Her face was aching, but she didn't care. She grabbed a bottle of vodka and sat on her sofa, and straight from the bottle she drank. Days and months went by. Aya didn't receive any calls from anyone. She tried contacting her manager, but he wouldn't pick up his phone or would straight deny her calls. She was confined to the walls of her house. She had enough money to live without working for a couple of years to come, and that was good, but she was spiraling down a hole of immense depression, trying to ease with excessive drugs and alcohol. When she needed, she would hire a male escort to go to her house to make love to her, but no one was allowed to see her face. All the spotlights that were directed to Aya eventually were lost in oblivion, as was her career. Aya's life as she knew was over. Far from the bright-colored lights of the main streets of Kabukicho and Shinjuku, hidden in shadows of a dirty alleyway, far from everyone's eyes, a man was pulling his pants up and a woman was finishing fixing her underwear under her skirt. The man pulled up his wallet and extended his arm to give the money to the woman. As she was about to take it, he threw it on the ground and started laughing. "Next time, at least make some noise, freaking witch." And he walked out of the alleyway. She kneeled down to pick up the money. As she stood up, she saw a man wearing a black suit looking at her. He had his hair in a ponytail. Aya knew he wasn't anything good. Ever since Aya was growing short of money and had to sell things of her house because of her drug and alcohol addictions, no one would hire her or call her for interviews. The world had turned its back to her. She thought of coming back and live with her parents, but they were too old. Soon enough she was going to be the one taking care of them, and in her mind, that was not what she wanted to do. Aya never saw or answered any of her parents' calls after the accident. She was either ashamed, stoned, or too hammered to do so. She had to resort to the streets. Nobody would know who she was anyway. Aya always was careful enough to stay out of trouble with the police and, worse, the Yakuza. She managed to do well. She had money enough to buy her 2 days of food and a fix. "This is my street." Aya didn't say anything and started walking without making any eye contact, but he violently grabbed her and pulled her back. He pulled her close to him. "I said, this is my street." "Yes, I heard you the first time. I'm leaving," Aya said, maintaining a firm voice. "Not without my permission. You are working here, I see. You know, my girls really got upset of seeing you stealing their potential clients." "Let me go," Aya said, trying to set herself free. He grabbed her wrist and squeezed, making her let the money fall to the ground again. He pushed her away and took the money. "Give back," she said. Without any warning, he punched Aya on the face, making her fall down to the ground. I will give you something else. Then he started kicking her non-stop. He would put her back on her feet again to punch her over and over again. Some were to her stomach, but most of them were to the face. No one ever had laid down a hand on her, not even her parents. The horrific sensation that she was about to die was overwhelming. He finally let go of her and she fell on her knees. To think about it. You look kinda hot. He grabbed her by her hair and put her face to the wall. Then pulled a knife out of his pocket and put to her neck. Now, be a good girl and I might let you live. And he pulled her skirt up. A few hours later, Aya managed to get back to her house. Walking back was painful, and everyone looked at her bruised and bleeding self. Her tight black dress was dirty and torn. Everyone, after having that second of judgmental stare, turned their faces away with disgusted faces, and no one offered to help. Her house was a mess. She didn't remember the last time she cleaned it, and she also didn't have money to hire anyone to do that as she was once used to. Trash was everywhere. She stumbled to the kitchen. The only thing she had left was her fridge, bed, and clothes, nothing else. She grabbed a bottle half empty of whiskey and took a major sip. The alcohol stung as it got in contact with her mouth. Out of her purse she pulled a small transparent plastic bag full of a white powder. She put the content on the floor, got into all fours, and sniffed. She laid on the floor for a while and drank more. Who are you now, Mrs. Aya Matsubara? She started laughing. Who the hell are you now? A cold breeze surrounded her and a voice whispered to her ear. Now, you are me. And then she realized what was feeling different since she got back to the hospital. The sensation of being watched was over. That was what was missing. She stood up and looked around. She was alone. She felt alone. She stumbled to her bathroom and looked at the broken mirror. And through the deformed reflection of the mirror, she saw a woman appear behind her. Tall, with a red trench coat with black roses and a black face mask. Aya didn't look back. She was fixed looking at the woman's white glowing eyes, and slowly the woman put her hand on Aya's shoulder. Strangely enough, Aya felt comfortable. You are beautiful now, the woman said. Aya closed her eyes and gently grabbed the woman's hand and felt some kind of relief. One day Aya saw on her phone the image of the new sensation of the fashion world. Ayako Tsukumori, a beautiful girl, but she wasn't half of what Aya once was, and by her side, smiling and confident, was her former manager. Aya was engulfed by rage and threw her phone to the wall, breaking it. Everybody used me. Did whatever they wanted with me, earned money using me. They turned me into this. It's their fault. It's their fault, she yelled. Aya would make them pay for every second of suffering they've put upon her, on turning their backs to her. One by one, they would fall. As night came, Aya took a long shower, picked the very same elegant black suit she wore from the day she left the hospital, a pair of black leather gloves, her black face mask, and finally, her beautiful red long trench coat with black roses drawn on it, and got dressed. They took everything from her, but she was going to pay them back. They took her what she loved the most, and so as she grabbed a large pair of scissors from one of her kitchen drawers, she would take their lives. Later, shrouded by darkness in an alleyway in Kabukicho, Aya waited for the first target, as he was the first that ever touched her in a way nobody did. She saw him, the very same man that beat and abused her. He was coming to the alleyway, and then, she slowly and elegantly, as the supermodel she was, walked out of the shadows and stood in front of him. He stopped and looked at her. It took some time, but then he recognized her. It was the woman from the other night. I thought I made myself clear that I didn't want you around here anymore. She didn't say anything. He noticed there was something different about her, not only the fact she was well dressed, but something with her eyes. They were weird, evil. Aya walked slowly closer to him. Was she taller than him the last time? No, he didn't think so, but now, she was. That bothered him more than normal. Are you going just to stand there like the stupid witch you are? And then in a very gentle voice Aya asked, "Do you think I'm pretty?" The man frowned, puzzled by the question. What? Suddenly Aya grabbed him by his throat, lifting him from the ground and bringing him close to her. Do you think I am pretty? The man couldn't speak. He started to gag. She threw him against the wall and he fell on trash cans, turning everything over. Even before he could stand up, Aya, faster than he could even realize, grabbed him again and lifted him up. Let go, he said. Aya grabbed her scissors and opened them in front of the man's face. I will ask again. Am I pretty? Go fa. He was interrupted as the blades of the scissors pierced into his both eyes. Blood poured from his eye sockets. His body started shaking like a fish out of water. And without any kind of difficulty, she pressed the ring handles together. His body stopped moving. She pulled the scissor out. With one movement, she splashed the blood clean from the blades. Seconds later, there was only the body of the man among a big pile of trash as a pool of blood was forming under his head. Later, in the parking lot of the Bokudo hospital, a man was going for his car. He was alone. Some lights flickered, nothing that bothered him. As he was about to enter his car, he heard steps echoing. He looked around. He didn't see anyone and the steps stopped. He opened his car door, the steps started again, and again the doctor looked around. Turning his back from his vehicle, this time the sound as someone walking in high heels continued. He tried to look at the source, but it was difficult because of the reverberation the place made the sound have. Once again, it stopped and he still kept looking. Koichiro gave up, and when he turned to the car, he was startled by the presence of a tall woman wearing a red trench coat with black roses drawn on it. She had a black face mask covering her mouth. Dr. Koichiro. Remember me? It didn't take him long to recognize her. Mrs. Matsubara. Oh my God, he smiled in relief. You scared me a little. It's so good to see you. How have you been? You look wonderful, he said, admiring the way she was dressed. Aya faked a sweet voice and asked, Really? Do you think I am beautiful? Yes, and then in a shy voice he asked, May I see you without your mask? Aya slowly removed it, showing a bad-healed scar, and so she opened her mouth. The skin started to rip apart and blood came out of it. And now? Do you think I am pretty now? And in a blink of an eye, Aya pierced the doctor in the stomach with her scissors and lifted him off the ground. Are you happy, doctor? Are you happy with your creation? You ruined my life, and now I will end yours. Aya started to open and close the scissor inside the doctor's stomach, shredding everything inside. Blood gushed out from Koichiro's mouth. He tried to scream, but it was useless. He died before he did anything. As soon as his lifeless body was thrown to the ground, Aya was nowhere to be found. In the residential area of Shibuya, a man was looking at his phone on his couch. Suddenly, he hears his door knock. Probably was the delivery food he ordered, about time since he was dying to go to bed. As soon as he opened the door, he felt a brief gust of wind passing through him. There was no one there. He stepped outside and looked around. The streets were deserted. As he turned back, he saw her, a tall Japanese woman with long black straight hair dressed in a black suit topped by a long red trench coat with black roses. She had a black face mask covering her mouth and her eyes had an evil and demeaning look. The woman grabbed him and tossed him back inside the house as an empty bag of flour. The door closed on its own. He yelled at her. "You! What are you doing here? I'll call the police." Aya started walking towards the man on the floor. "No, you won't. What you want, Aya? We have no more business between us," he said, crawling away from her. "How is your new plaything, money-making whore of yours, doing? Are you draining her enough as you drained me? What are you talking about?" Aya removed her mask and let him see what she really was. She opened her deformed mouth and it opened more than possible. Blood started to run from the sides of it. Aya's manager screamed in complete horror. She grabbed her scissor and kneeled on his chest, holding him to the ground by his neck. "What's the problem?" she asked. "Am I not beautiful enough for you? Aya, please, stop. I'll give you anything you want. We can talk to the agencies. We can schedule interviews as the survival of a strong woman recovering from an accident. You would be the hero," he said in despair. Aya laughed and said, "You don't understand, do you? That life is long gone and the world turned their backs to me. No one knows, not even you know how it feels like. We can find the best doctors of Japan. You are a gorgeous woman, Aya. It is just going to fix your wound." Aya interrupted him, yelling, "It won't heal." And she banged his head to the floor. Her manager started to cry. "Aya, please, stop." Aya opened her scissor. "Open your mouth," she said in a voice that held all the anger and hate of the world. "Aya, please. Open your mouth." She then pressed his throat in order to make him gag and open his mouth. She put the scissors with one blade inside and the other one touching his skin outside, right in one of the corners of the manager's mouth. She pressed the ring handles. The man screamed like no one else could. Now was the time for the next corner. The same as before. She pressed the ring handles, another horrendous scream of pain from the man. The floor soon enough became red with blood. Aya let him go and stood up watching. He tried to crawl away. He didn't go too far. The manager was dead. Everything was quiet. The doorbell rang. Calmly the woman went to the door and opened. It was the delivery boy. He widened his eyes as he saw the tall, beautiful, and well-dressed woman with a face mask. The only thing he said was that it was already paid online. Aya thanked him. As he was leaving, she called him. He came back. "Do you think I'm pretty?" The young boy got a little red, but then he answered yes. As soon as he did, she immediately pulled him the same way she did her manager inside the house and the door closed. Later, Aya was back at her dark, dirty, and messy house. She dropped the blood-stained scissor to the ground, and as soon as she took her trench coat out, she fell on her knees crying. If there was a better definition of sadness and depression, the world was still about to create, because at that moment it was called Aya Matsubara. She put her bloody hands to her face, hiding it. Then she felt a presence by her side and hugged her. Aya said, crying, "This is not what I wanted. It was not supposed to be like this." And then the voice of the presence whispered to her ear, "Don't worry, it will soon be over. We will soon be one." Aya uncovered her face, and the first thing she saw was the scissor on the floor. Aya understood what had to be done. She grabbed the scissor, put back her trench coat, and sat down on the sofa, tears still rolling down her face and mask. She pulled one sleeve up. She stabbed her wrist and made a movement cutting it. Blood flowed. Aya was getting dizzy and lied down on the sofa. Her vision was getting blurry. She saw what she called the Red Woman, but then she finally realized how similar they were. She looked exactly like her. The woman removed her mask and Aya's. And before it was all over in eternal darkness, she felt a cold kiss on her lips. The next day, Tokyo police was all over the place investigating the gruesome murders of a doctor, a fashion agent, a delivery boy, and a member of the Yakuza. 2 of the murders were caught on security cameras, which got them puzzled, because all of the deaths occurred pretty much at the same time, in a difference of 5 minutes from each, and that seemed impossible since the locations were around 17 kilometers away from each other. They thought about a group of serial killers, but as the videos of the security cameras had shown, it was without a doubt the same person. The person they didn't take long to find out who, since they discovered that the agent and the doctor had one person in common, the former model Aya Matsubara. The police went to her house to find her dead on her sofa. They took her body to the morgue, but they didn't check on her right away. Later they got back to do an autopsy. Aya's body wasn't there anymore. No one ever saw her again. Some time passed by, and mysterious deaths being attributed to what they called the slit-mouthed woman kept occurring in Tokyo and other areas of Japan. Kids went missing, but later their bodies would be found mutilated and some other with their mouths slit open. The police never caught the perpetrator. The entire world knew about the legend of the Kuchisake Onna. They revered it as one of the strongest and famous urban legends that would happen in Japan. What they didn't know was that the evil regarding the Onryo of the slit-mouthed woman could claim whatever victim she wanted. It didn't matter where a person would be. A fat Hollywood producer was drunk walking to the parking lot after getting out of a nightclub in LA. He heard steps coming towards him. "Oh, hello there, beautiful." A tall Japanese woman with long black straight hair, wearing a beautiful red trench coat with black roses drawn on it, wearing a black face mask, her eyes glowed white, pulled a very sharp and rusty scissor and asked in a demonic voice, "Do you think I'm beautiful?"
If you liked this video, please consider subscribing and liking to help us bring you more Japanese ghost stories. Thank you for watching.